I heard you say something there, Brandy. You said you don't think it is. Okay.
Well, first, when we first went live, I was like, there's nobody even here except us.
No, but there is now. They're just,
but now
they're actually just, we have to like,
they're very
when we get
timely.
live, it takes a few seconds for us to let them get on. You're like, no one. I'm
Were they sitting,
okay,
were they sitting in a waiting room?
We'll have a lovely time.
Were they sitting in a waiting room?
No, anybody can get online and then they just wait. It says once the event goes live, then it just lets them in. But it takes a few seconds for us to do that.
Hey, by the way, waiting rooms, we could have Joyce, this would be a fun conversation. We could talk about waiting room experiences. You know, the bad ones, and mainly they go from bad to worse, but do you know who has the best waiting room?
Who?
The best waiting room is Les Schwab tires. Why? Because they have popcorn, and I take my son and we basically drain the entire cabinet of really buttery, salty popcorn.
Oh my goodness. Well, I didn't know that. Usually the tire situations get resolved while I'm at work. And so I bet my husband knows all about the Les Schwab waiting room.
And really bad coffee, but it's amazing what you're willing to do while you're waiting.
Of course.
True.
You know, we visited a church one time that had almost like a concession stand off to the side, but open to where everyone was worshiping. This was in a gymnasium, actually. And all of the concessions were available during the entire service. And to this day, my dad refers to that as the popcorn church.
I remember, Japhet, one of the first times I met you, I think that you guys had a popcorn machine in your office at Andrews University. Wasn't that true?
We did. We did.
It created the most amazing smells, though. You know, fresh popcorn is one of those great smells.
Covered up every other type of smell. It was amazing.
You don't seem.
What other smells were in the chaplain's office?
Do you know, there are some students who come in and they are fresh, very fresh. And it was just a remarkable scent that just permeated everything.
Or unfresh.
You should make a sanitizer that's that fragrance.
Yeah, they should. It's actually really hard to get any kind of air freshener that smells any good at all. I hate all of them. I've tried so many. I'm just like, I like candles though. Candles are just great. And candles are fantastic. And you know, you can leave them burning all night long. You can leave your house, you can come back and it's fine, allegedly.
Japhet, we need to talk.
Now this is a little secret, you know, for you. This is like opening the curtain up for the kind of conversations we've had in planning one projects, for example. But Japhet, do you remember we were reflecting on the air deodorizers from the Westin? You know, they have a particular smell that permeates the whole hotel, and so we're having these conversations about how do we create the right aroma in the room that's subtle and fresh, because there's oh no, you're going to have it right there, aren't you?
This, my friends, is the fragrance of the Westin Hotel.
Wow.
I'm in Seattle right now. It feels so good.
Did you guys practice
wow.
I bought the little machine. So you know how everybody has this, like hotels have this and supermarkets have this. So I bought the little machines. They're about this big, and you can buy the fragrance of the hotel that they've tested on people with allergies and all sorts of stuff. And then I placed it all over the church in little locations. So when you would come in, it would like, wow, this feels like another home. It feels great.
So this is going to be a little warning then to my four conversation partners. At the end, when we have our little riff at the end, the question, in addition to what you're doing today, is going to be, what do you consider to be the single greatest smell? So just keep that. I'm giving you some preparation. So if you could just say that is the smell of the gods, like that is. So just don't answer now, but I'm giving you some time to reflect on that.
Okay. Hey, I won't say Becky then.
Japhet.
you said an emotional.
Are we recording? Are we recording live right now?
We are live.
I'm afraid so.
So I'm gonna rescue us. Psalm 63 for all of our conversation partners around the globe. If you could open up your Bibles or want to, right, to Psalm 63. That's where we're headed. If you're new, we're in a series looking at Psalms that are messing with us, kind of challenging our thinking. And we've been, for probably a couple months now, have been going in reverse order numerically. So we started kind of up near 150 and we're moving back to Psalm 1. And by the way, we've got some really good next moves. We're going to do we're going to wrap this up at the end of October, and then we're going to move to 4 weeks on Thanksgiving. The American Thanksgiving, of course, is in November. So we're going to do some deeper reflection on the importance of developing Thanksgiving in your life. And then we're looking at Luke, correct? Isn't that right, Japhet? Mm-hmm. Dr. Luke.
Yep.
And I think we have a clever title, actually, like the obstetrician, Dr. Luke delivers Jesus, I think, or something along those lines. So we'll be taking a look at about what Luke has to say, and that'll take us through December. So that'll be kind of fun to do coming up. So yeah, make sure that on the chat, you click all attendees if you want to participate in that way. And I'm going to just say hello to our conversation partners.
Paddy couldn't make it today because his internet is down, and he did try to reboot all of Portland, but it was not possible because Joyce prevented him. But he is trying.
My fault.
Oh, Katie.
Joyce is using all the power in Portland.
Right.
That's
I'm
awesome.
not there.
That's
I'm
awesome.
not in Portland right now. So.
Oh, you're not? Oh, okay.
Mm-mm.
That's why it's working.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
I was going to try to tell Paddy I shared the power with you, but not him. But I guess that doesn't work if you're not here.
Nice. Yeah, very nice. So good morning to everyone around the world. Good morning, Joyce, over in Portland.
Good morning.
Good morning, Katie, and wherever you are.
Canyon Beach.
Oh, very nice. Good morning, Katie. Brandy, good morning. Aloha.
Aloha.
And good morning, my friend Japhet.
Yes, in Colorado, enjoying the sunshine inside my garage.
Very good. So let me give you a little forecast about where we're headed today. Psalm 63. This is a deeply emotional psalm, and so going to talk a little bit about the role of emotions in the spiritual life and relationship to God. So we're going to read the text, have a prayer. I'll kind of frame it up. I'm going to let you know that I'm going to break away just for a few minutes today and run one of my offspring to Sabbath school. So I'll be jumping off for about 6 minutes. Don't calculate the speed required to make that happen in 6 minutes, but I'll be jumping off just for a couple minutes to get one of my kiddos to Sabbath school, and then I'll be back. So Sister Joyce, would you pray for us, and then we'll read the text.
Be glad to. Father, thank you for the opportunity to gather with friends this morning to look at Psalm 63. And I can only imagine how it must land on you when your people praise you with such unbridled joy and affection and love. And we seek to do that in a way that pleases you, in a way that blesses you, in a way that blesses us. And we want that kind of a relationship with you. And so we dig deep into this psalm, hoping for a deeper relationship with you. We love you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Joyce. So we're going to actually break this psalm up. I think now I'm forgetting the order.
I'll start off.
I think it's Japhet, Joyce, Katie, Brandy, and then I'll finish up. We're each going to grab a couple verses. We didn't want anybody to miss the opportunity to read this powerfully emotional psalm. So,
all right, here we go. Psalm 63, verse 1. O God, you are my God, and earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you, and my flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. So I have looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and glory.
Your unfailing love is better than life itself. How I praise you. I will praise you as long as I live, lifting up my hands to you in prayer.
My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food, and my mouth will praise you with joyful lips, when I remember you upon my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night.
Because you have been my help. Therefore, in the shadow of your wings, I will rejoice. My soul follows close behind you. Your right hand upholds me.
Those who want to kill me will be destroyed. They will go down to the depths of the earth. They will be given over to the sword and become food for jackals. But the king will rejoice in God, all who swear by God and glory in him, while the mouths of liars will be silenced.
Mm-hmm.
I've written down seek, thirst, seen, love, life, praise, satisfied, think, cling. This is the sappy psalm. This is David in full, I think in full emotional engagement with God here. It's not the only psalm where that takes place. In fact, the scriptures are replete with emotional language connected to God. It's interesting. Some scholars have identified some 50 to 60 different emotions that are listed in the Old Testament portion of the scriptures. It's everywhere. His anger, his love, his frustration. It's the tremendous amount of emotion. And then actually you have an intensification of emotion when you just look at usage in the life of Jesus, which is interesting. So it's like you have a load of it in the First Testament, and then you have a heavy dose of emotional language in the Gospels where you're really getting to see God's emotions through Jesus. And then the Gospel of John, you have the most intensification. And then interesting, it's in John 13 through 17, where you have the last discourse of Jesus, where he's expressing all of these deep emotions, that you have the sort of the pinnacle of the emotion of Jesus. Couple things I think that are interesting. Just an observation. Matthew Elliott is one of the scholars who's looked at the emotional life of God and how that relates to us. He says emotional moments and emotional understanding often lead us to the greatest clarity in our thinking and understanding. These are the light bulb moments. They capture the truth in a snapshot as no amount of rational thinking can. And a lot of his reflections about the emotions of God is trying to turn on end this idea that we often have in religious circles, that you have this rational, holy, orthodox side to your personality. And then there's this wildly dangerous emotional side that's nothing but the devil's playing field, right? And this psalm introduces us to the idea that emotions are spiritual, that they can be moral. Not only are they negative, just like rational thinking can turn negative, but they can be a powerful way that we connect to God and one another. So I want to throw out an opening question, and then we'll see where this goes. Because I think even before we get to a particular emotion in Psalm 63, what do you make of that? Of our current sort of in a rational age, in the modern age, where science, in some ways has tried to demyth everything and kind of take emotion out of the equation. What do you make of this in your own experience? What are your observations about emotions' role in the spiritual life and connecting to God?
I really don't think it's actually possible to truly be in an honest conversation with God without allowing your emotions to be free. So, immediately that's my first thought.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Brandy.
I believe that without the emotional connection to what we're studying theologically, I don't think we can actually even get it correct. Like, I think we'll misunderstand it and misinterpret, because like if we have two basic
understandings like you're supposed to love God and love your neighbor. Well, how do you understand love without an emotional connection, without a personal relationship to love itself? It actually makes theology impractical and unimportant without the emotional side.
Alex, I grew up in the, well, our faith tradition, the one that most of us belong to here, went through our schools up through high school, and I heard a lot of we are an intellectual faith tradition where we focus on what we know to be true and we study the facts. It's a very intellectual approach, and that an emotional approach was almost like it was lazy. And I mean, as a church musician, I've heard all the time, you know, music can manipulate people's emotions, and that's a bad thing. And I'm like, what do you mean manipulate people's emotions? Since when do we think that being emotional? Look at David talking about how he feels about his God. It's as he can't live without God any more than he can live without food and water and light. And when did we get the idea that emotions are a bad thing? The fastest way to bring me to tears in a worship service is to have a song cut through right to what the Holy Spirit is trying to tell me. Terry in our chat room is talking about this, and I'm just thinking, when did we decide that emotions were a bad thing? I disagree with that completely.
And why is it that music that inspires us, I'm with you, Joyce, and there's music that inspires us, that creates joy or creates hope when you're down, or allows you to wallow for a bit while you go through something complex, is just supposed to be just human and not inspired by God at all. I've always believed that the notes, the sounds, our voices, and it's an ability to be able to hear. I mean, that's why we love to hear each other. It's just difficult to not be able to hear each other. This is all creates like a reaction, and it could be healthy and it can be extended as well.
I think emotions.
Go ahead, Katie.
I was going to say, I think emotions give you a clue to how you're perceiving something. So if you're emotional, like with sadness, or you're overcome with tears, you know, like a worship song, what about that worship song are you perceiving that's impacting you? So I think those emotions are signals about how your psyche and your emotions are handling something. So I think when we disregard those, we're almost disregarding our own processing, our own perception of what happens to us. And I think that's really difficult to do.
I think, Joyce, to your question, you know, when did this happen? I do think that the age of rationalism, of scientific thought, the Protestants brought in being right about things was important, like being able to identify almost in a scientific way, right and wrong. And I think it had the effect of expunging the emotions. I put a question to all of you, and I think that at the root of a lot of the worship wars in the Christian community, particularly in the Caucasian community, I think that in Caucasian communities, I think this is a particular problem, that emotionalism in worship, or music that would cause you to leap out of your pew and jump and scream hallelujah and raise your hands. I feel like the root of the worry about all of that is almost this feeling that it is wrong to experience emotions, particularly in a religious context, that God is fundamentally not an emotional God. He's a rational God of logic, and it's a cold-hearted God, honestly. And I think I just was thinking about our worship wars in context of this, and I think that's where it comes from. It's a fear of cutting loose, because cutting loose with anger or joy or frustration or whatever is just fundamentally not okay. I think. What do you guys make of that?
Well, something so interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jay.
No,
I
good.
just-
Absolutely.
Okay.
You're way earlier than me.
So it just makes me think about the fact that like whenever it's always intrigued me, this same war that you mentioned, Alex, and that we have this kind of war between the mind and the body, like emotions and body and thinking, and yet we are people who believe that those are one, that the soul is body and breath, that we are one, and yet we believe that in like a theological state of the dead sort of way, and yet when it comes to worship, we want to separate them. We want to make it more dualistic. We want to so our theology in worship doesn't match our theology in like body and soul.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who said that he'd visited Colorado once, and he went to Red Rocks for a Lauren Daigle concert. And I said we were trying to get tickets to go to that concert as well, and we were not able to do it. And so he described how amazing it is. And this fellow is Seventh Adventist, and he said, oh, I stood up, I wept, I cried, I sang, I even attempted to dance, right? I attempted to move. And then we laughed about the fact that we recall and we understand that the most rhythm we have is in our big toe inside our shoe. And that's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of the way that we are. We grew up in cultures where you did not really move, and all movement was stayed, and you could allow your toe to move, and that was about it, right? But I don't see that with children. I don't see that with children who have not been conditioned to do that. I actually see kids responding naturally. Like Brandy, you were talking about the whole being. They just envelop joy and sadness and hope and all of those emotions together, which is actually really wonderful to see. And then we kind of later on say, hey, stop.
Yeah.
Slow down.
Condition. Mm-hmm.
At some point we become very self-conscious, and how does that even happen? You know, whether it's in my work or in some of our more traditional church settings, I think we've all heard we have to balance the heart and the head, right? The emotions and the intellectual. And I absolutely reject that notion. I don't think you can balance the heart and the head. Why not be full on with both? Why not fully engage your heart and fully engage your head? I just don't think it's something we should. Yeah, it's like we shouldn't have to choose, right? What's wrong with full on?
I don't think that this necessarily means that all human beings have to jump up and down and express emotions in the same way. And I think Tim may have mentioned this in the chat. I mean, I think what we're talking about is, I think it's actually deeper than physicality, although I think physicality is an expression of that. I think it's about even feeling a certain, I'm surprised about the guilt. How many times have I heard in my life when someone goes, I'm really sorry for crying. I've had people apologize for like crying during a sermon or crying during a conversation or crying after a loved one died. I'm sorry, I'm so emotional. There's this almost this sense that the emotions are to be hidden in some way. Does that make sense? You know, like
yeah.
And we have that impulse. So I'm not thinking so much about worship style, but rather what's at the heart of our resistance to things that would cause us to feel, right?
Yeah. And I think, Alex, that it really comes down to that there is some cultural belief that we have that it's preventing, slowing down, stopping, protecting, and that's why we must contain it. And I think that the psalmist here, when I read David's words here, you see it all through his writing, and I think it's phenomenal that we have so many psalms that actually all are about the emotions, the full spectrum of emotions that take place. I mean, when was the last time that you went to a religious service, a gathering, and you laughed so hard that your sides hurt? It would be horrible for us to be laughing that hard and to be that happy. We feel like it has to be kind of contained. And I think I think there has to be laughter and there has to be the freedom to be able to do that. And I think we've used that a few little choice verses, God of order, to imply God never laughs, he never smiles, he's just deadpan through all the expressions.
Yeah, I think that, Joyce, you've said this before. I think the line is, or you've quoted someone, but I think it's one that to talk about that you don't necessarily remember what somebody said or what they, but you remember how they made you feel, right? So the feeling is
Maya Angelou, I think.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. And you and Maya are just like poets of, the poets of my life.
In my dreams.
But I think, I tend to be kind of rational in ways and kind of the way I approach life, probably more so. But I always thought through in sermon preparation, and when I'm talking to younger preachers, for example, when you're writing a sermon, Japhet, Brandy, I mean, we've all written, Joyce, all of us, Katie, we've all written presentations. I think a core question you have to ask is not only, what do I want them to know? What do I want them to do with this? But what do I want them to feel? In other words, or what does God, I mean, it's better to say, what would God wish for them to feel on this experience? And I think that that's a missing, for those, I know there's preachers and other Sabbath school teachers, people that do a lot of this on the conversation. I think that's a critical question to ask when you're writing a sermon. Well, I think you need to think through, because you can get them to the right information and even the right marching orders, but I think you have missed, if you're not in tune with what God wants the feeling to be of this experience. Now, music, Joyce, I think this is maybe a much easier, but I think it's critical. Japhet, pick up on that.
No, I actually think so. I was just remembering a time where you and I had a conversation about preaching, and you said, if we spend so much time researching and prepping, and then we write, and then we rewrite and rewrite. And if you have got to the stage where you've rewritten the message, your seventh time, and as you are going through it, you bored yourself. And I remember you saying this to me, if you're bored yourself halfway through a portion of it, that's not, it's not necessary. Yeah. And so you just cut out, you have to be engaged through the entire message. I think it's actually from the First Testament. It's like the prophet said it as well. Bring the music.
I forgot.
Connect with God. Do you remember that?
No, Japhet, I forgot. I'll tell you that probably has driven me in my own preaching life more than anything is I try to go through the material multiple times, and then I ask myself, is this boring me, or is this not moving or motivating me in some way at an emotional level? And even this week, Jay, I did a sermon, and you were part of recording that, and I mean, it was emotional. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think that's part of it. Anyway, hey, we just went on a preaching tangent.
About,
sorry,
actually, Alex, what was that sermon about? Actually?
Yeah, I can't. But how did it make you? But how did it make you feel? That's the question.
It is amazing.
Hey, another. Let me come back. Let me come back to the text. Let me come back to the text here, and ask you a question. Your love is better than life. Your love is better than life. Now that sounds like something a teenager in love with another teenager would say to another teenager, right? Oh, I don't care if I fail and flunk out of high school because I love you. What do you make of this? I think we need to talk about this David's evaluation that the feelings of love between he and God are greater than the sum of life itself. Let's talk about that a little bit. Brandy? Joyce?
Yes.
Jump in.
So my thought about that is regarding the verses before that. When I was reading, like in the sense that my soul thirsts for you, my flesh longs for you in a dry and thirsty land where there is no water. So it's coming from a place of scarcity. It's coming from, I'm thirsty, I am dry, I am empty. He's speaking, probably says he's in like the wilderness of Judah. So he's speaking in a physical sense as well as probably an emotional and spiritual sense. Like this is a whole body experience psalm. In fact, C.S. Lewis, when I was reading what he said about it, he was like, it would almost say he had an appetite for God. more than just a love for God, because it sounds too spiritual. Like it's more of like an appetite. Like it's not just with his mind, it's with his body that he's craving God. And so in this, so then I can read verse 3, because your loving kindness is better than life. Like this earthly life, I don't have even what I need right now. Like your love, and yet your love can sustain me. Like I can feel like that is all that I need in the midst of these circumstances. I can feel content and okay with you. And I think that that's just something that he's experienced over and over and over. Despite his circumstances, God has been faithful and has shown up and has been in the innermost part of his whole body experience, that he knows that his love is better than life. If he dies of thirst today, it's okay, because he experienced the love of God, and that's the eternal well. Like, yeah, I have more to say about all that.
So
I
how
remember
do
a
you
friend
experience? Yeah, Joyce, please.
I remember a friend telling me one time about her her practice and her habit in prayer life, and how she could be engaged in, short conversation, the one sentence thought prayers that we all have all day long. But when she got home from work, she would spend the next unmeasured amount of time in prayer, and that her entire day was focused on, I can't wait to run inside the house and leave the rest of my day behind, because that's where I get to spend uninterrupted, unmeasured time with God. And her whole day was focused around, how do I get to that point? And she was so excited telling me about that time that she spent every day with God that she started crying as she's telling me about it. And I remember thinking, wow, how often does that happen to me? And much less every day, at a time where I'm just racing through my day to try to get to that time. And I kind of read that into this, your love is better than life itself. It's like, I just want to get my life to that point where I can spend that time with God. How often do we think that?
Like that.
I was thinking about, Joyce, similarly, earlier this morning. I was thinking about how your love is better than life is not a mathematical formula. So we could just theologize this and go, God's love is better than life, and we should order our thinking that way. And it would, of course, betray the whole ethos and the pathos, really, of the psalm. And I was just trying to think through, in my life, in your life, and how do I make sure I'm investing in experiences and opening up space to feel this loving relationship with God? And and I think Brandy's right. I think David had many experiences. I think some of them were reactive; they just came to him. But I think that it seems like there was a shaping of life. For example, says later, where is it? On the bed, on verse 6. On my bed, I remember you. I mean, that has this idea of laying down. The lights go off. I'm not searching. I'm not searching the web. I'm not on Amazon or Facebook or random, but I'm laying down and it's quiet and everybody's gone to bed and I'm carving out some moments. Maybe I've got my ear-pods in and I'm listening to a powerful set of music that's connecting me to the divine. Maybe I'm, I don't know. It seems like that there is a proactive date night, if you will, to use that language, to come back to that language. But there's this thought that I need to cultivate these loving experiences with God, that they don't just happen.
Yeah.
That you got to, like any human relationship, it doesn't just happen. You plan time with your kids, you plan time with your friends, it has to get sorted out. Right? I mean, is that not true? I think that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. I think that's the element of the daily formula that Jesus was counseling all of us to always be part of, to be connected to him. And when we allow it to become a requirement instead of an engagement, we lose some of the essence and beauty of that. And I think that's where we actually need to make it part of our, just like a meal that you have, like water that you drink. And I think that the metaphor he uses of the water is phenomenal then, but phenomenal for us as well. I mean, we take it for granted sometimes, but when you're really, really parched, there's nothing quite like water. It really is amazing. And I think that there's this deep connection side that David's trying to pull us towards with God as well.
So
I remember.
I
No, please go.
Well, I had an experience yesterday that was the first time I've had this. So this isn't by any way a normal thing for me, but I just started, a friend challenged me a week ago to study the names of Jesus, just all the different things he was called. And so I've been making a list, like Morning Star, the second Adam, all they just making a list. And I'm over like 130. I'm like, okay, I'm already at a lot. Let's just pause there and let's just take a day and go over one at a time and just reflect on it. And I've never had consistent devotions for that reason, because I don't want it to become something that I feel like is salvational to me. Like that if I don't do it, then I don't have Jesus today. Like I don't want to feel like if my relationship is that way. It doesn't work for me. But this week I've been consistently studying every day, and I have got like I have lost time. Like 2 or 3 hours have gone by on one name, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know it was that long. To the point that yesterday, and this is what was the rare experience for me. I was invited to go plein air painting with some professional painters here in Hawaii, which is an amazing experience. I canceled it because I wanted more time. And I was like, what? And I didn't even realize I was doing it. I was like, I'm not done. I just want to stay here. And I don't know, that to me, I'm not going to apologize for crying, was beautiful, because I just loved looking at who he is and thinking about just that one name. And there's so many names, because it's just opening up that relationship, that time even more. And we're just spending that time. And I figure right now, while I'm not working and still studying, I can do that. I have space, and I'm just going to take it. I'm just going to enjoy it and live in it, because his love is better than life. It's just like you can get lost in him, and you do in love with other people.
No, that's really good. I think that intimacy with God has to be in that arena. I think about how many times in Saltworks, Brandy, over the last 6 months. I went back and looked at the archives, by the way, this week. I'm like, man, we've been doing this for half a year. And I think back to all the good conversations, but what percentage of our conversations are about God and not to God? There's nothing wrong with assessing, about God. Does that make sense what I'm saying? There's a difference between, and I think church experiences, et cetera, can often be about thinking about him from a distance, as if Katie, for example, if I said, tell me about one of your friends, and you said, well, my friend is 5'11", 165 pounds, and is 23.2 years old, and you just started to give facts, or like you read a resume, and they graduated and they have this degree, and you just simply gave a fact sheet about the person, that would have missed really the nature of your friendship. Is that, you see, and I think that's often when we think about putting together systematic theology, or there's list of doctrines, and all churches have them, or we think about, I think that we again, we talk a lot about, but not, and even right now I'm talking about, I'm not giving a confession now, I'm giving a description of the situation.
Less vulnerable.
It's less vulnerable. And I think, even a couple weeks ago, I think I stopped for a second and I said, God, I want to talk to you for a second. Right. And it all of a sudden it changes things, and we kind of consign the talking to God in a prayer, and we do that for about a minute. And then we go ahead and don't really talk to him for the next hour. And I think there's a shift there, maybe. Japhet, you were gonna.
No, I was just thinking, Alex, that I was listening to some of the chats as well that in comments have been said, but I think that emotion and the expression that God created us with the ability to experience so many different levels is really essential and part of being human. And if it's part of being human, I also believe it's actually reflective of who God is, God Father, the Son, and the Spirit. That they live in community, they live in love, and we have, I think, part of our roots way back 1,000 years has always been the struggle of like, how do we allow ourselves to express and grow and not allow ourselves out of control. If you read any of Martin Luther's comments of his personal life, it's horrific. It's really horrific. I mean, he swore, he drank, he was just out of control, right? He wrote a lot of great songs as well. And he wrote a lot of deep theology. And I think what we have to realize is that we are complex human beings. And what we've done is we've tried, I think, at times to curtail and control so much that we've diminished the ability to actually grow, even to explore and to question and to ask. Because I think when you lose some of that, you lose the ability to actually push yourself a bit further.
Probably the most sappy line. I said this was the sappy psalm. At least in the English translation I'm reading, this is the line that I had to stop for a second. So I'm going to ask you about this. In verse 8, I cling to you. And of course we have the word, Joyce, I'm going to put this to you, and then Katie, you can jump in too. So the word we use is clingy. And if we say someone is clingy, that's not a compliment. So David is clingy with God. So Joyce, I'm just going to put you on the spot. And then Katie, I'll put you on the spot second. What do you make of the clinginess of David with regard to God?
Yeah, that I struggle with that word. I mean, I remember as a mom of a toddler wanting to be sure that I was doing my best to raise a girl who wasn't clingy, who had some independence and wasn't afraid to interact with others, didn't hide behind my skirt, as they say. And we now use the word clingy as almost, I mean, it's kind of an insult, right? And yet here it is presented as, this is what I want for my relationship with my God. And I mean, I don't know what's behind. I'll kick it to Katie in a second here, and Miss Ancient Languages here can maybe tell us what was that word, and how did clingy relate? How did it translate? Is that really the best translation of what was actually intended? I have no idea, but maybe our interpretation of clingy speaks to that independence, that really there's no good translation for that in a relationship with Christ. Independence from our God, from Christ. Why would we want that? We value independence. We value strength and standing on your own. And there's no real space for that in a true, honest relationship with God, where we are dependent on Him for our water, for our food, for our light, for our very life itself. And that, to me, that clinginess isn't talking about an unhealthy, you don't strengthen me. It's a clinginess of, I don't have independence from my God. He absolutely sustains me. And if I don't cling, I'm going to die. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, it's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like here that the kind of connotation behind it is, it says following close or keep fast or pursue hard. And if you look at it closer, it says, figuratively, it's loyalty. It's wanting to be physically like present. So it looks like it's more of an intentional pursuit or choice of, I'm going to stick with this. So I think that's a really, yeah, kind of actually. Yeah, it looks more like kind of what Joyce is saying. It's like, you can't be away from Jesus. It's you're intentionally wanting to be near that presence. And I think that's interesting that it's associated with the word that we now see as like, not separating or creepy or something like that. I think that's really interesting. But yeah, that's kind of what the connotation is here.
God stalker.
Yeah.
I remember this this lady who is phenomenal. She's got to be in her mid 70s, early 80s, and she would always sit in the balcony of the church. And I was always puzzled by this. And the reason she sat in the balcony of the church is because that was the only place that she felt she could stand up at certain points and just raise her hands to God and sway to God and say, this is beautiful. But she felt that it was just too much to do it in the sanctuary, right? I think everybody has different expressions. I think Tim mentioned it much earlier that, we don't all have to express our emotions in the same way. But I think that we should all recognize that we do have emotions. And I feel that we are very comfortable to express those emotions when Chelsea Football Club is winning and Man U's losing. But I think that what we really need to be able to do is to be able to do that with God, and not just with our sports, and not just with, whatever we're supporting at the time.
Yeah, I think that's good, Jay. I think that it's important to remember that this is something to cultivate and grow. I'm going to come back to, there's a downside to emotions, just like there's a downside to the intellect. I mean, and I think that it should be matured, and it should be, we should grow in our emotions to God and one another. I think the fruit of the Spirit, if you look at that's sort of the goal of Christian discipleship, the fruit of the Spirit. 8 and the 9 of those kind of sound like emotions to me. Maybe self-control would be the one. I don't know. You could argue that, but they're richly emotional words. And I think that, how do I cultivate my impulses of joy? For example, how do I grow my peace, which really that's a richly emotional word. Love, of course, is pregnant with emotional implications. I think it would be interesting if, as a church, and churches that are represented, across the world. I'm not a flat earther. What did I just say? Across the world, around the world. Although I've been thinking about I've been thinking about coming a flat earther, because everybody needs a conspiracy, and I'm thinking it's an old one, but it's no, but around the globe. We represent so many churches, but what if we were building our discipleship curriculums and our reflections around how do we mature our emotions? You see, and because when you look at the fruit of the Spirit, that certainly is. Again, I think
that's a really good phrase. I like that, maturing the emotions, Alex. I like that.
So I think last point, and then I want to hear what you guys have to say on this, but I think it's more, I think this Psalm calls us, it's more than just recognizing that God is an emotional God and that we're emotional beings and that we ought to connect to him. I think that's a first step, but I also think it's a very specific invitation to grow in those emotions, knowing that we're also flawed human beings, knowing that we also have sinful impulses. And I even, you even look, the last emotion here is anger. They will be given over to the sword. They will be food for jackals. Well, anger is not a negative emotion. And I think that anger is a positive emotion, but but it can become destructive. Don't go to bed, with anger. I think it can be inflicted, but Jesus had loads of anger. Paddy McCoy's signature sermon is Jesus turning over the tables, right? Where he physically did that in a sermon, right? To demonstrate that. And I think anger, Jesus had, there's a load of anger. And I think, so how are we angry? In the face of injustice, in the face of when people are being left out. We've seen a lot of that kind of righteous indignation, we call it, even in the last few months as we've, the murder of George Floyd and the whole experience we're in now. Like, there's been a lot of righteous indignation. That's not a bad thing, as long as that anger is shaped by the right impulses and shaped by the things of God. So I think there's some proactivity here to this. I guess is my point. I think that as a church we need to think more about this and lean into it more and how we grow.
Yeah, I think there's got to be a willingness, though, to grow. And there's got to be a desire to grow, not just in all of us knowing exactly the same thing, because I think we call that the clone army, but actually us all growing in God at different rates, at different paces. As Brandy was saying earlier, that we don't all have to do devotionals in the same way. We have to find our path with God, but we have to be eager and interested to grow with God. And God's calling us all the time to that space, which is what this psalm for me is a great example. When you're in a space of heaviness, and the two options where it could have been for David, but the space of heaviness, you remember what God has done in the past, where God is going to take you to, and you're hoping that God's going to handle everything the way that you think it should be, but it's God's will in all of this. So I think it's a powerful psalm for that.
One of my favorite Sabbath schools that I've ever attended was here at Kailua Church, and now it's actually something they do on Zoom for like anybody who wants to come. So anybody could come, but it's an art therapy Sabbath school, and so they basically share a devotional time, and then they connect it to some sort of emotion or feeling or something that people can identify with, and they can think about within their own story. And then they do some sort of we have a family therapist that usually shares something, like she just shared about cognitive behavioral therapy, and like what the thoughts that you think change the ways that you feel, which shapes the way you behave. And then that continues in a loop, and how you can gain control over some of that, and you can reframe and you can shape your thoughts to help with your feelings to mature, to grow. And then that will outwork your behavior. Anyway, I'll just say, and then we do art based on those things. And it's been really powerful to see that because it's my first experience of that within the Adventist denomination, to have something that does focus on emotional health and well-being so intentionally and in a way that's very personal, very deep. You're using your hands. And you don't have to be good at art. It's just an expression to help you process that element of God and your relationship with Him and whatever's going on in your life. And it's just really powerful. And I think there's a lot of ways that we can be creative to move forward in that type of direction, to strengthen our hand in maturity emotionally.
I love that. When I was reflecting on this psalm here, what I did on another page here is I started to write down all the passages, the text, the ideas in the Bible where I felt there was just I recall a deep emotional reaction, and not just an intellectual reaction, but actually one where I felt like there was like something that hit me in my soul and said, God's speaking to you about something. And I started to write down, whether it was Revelation 4 and 5, or whether it was Zechariah, where the prophet expresses, the entrance as the high priest goes through and he's covered with all this excrement, and then there's this movement as they're passing through the process where it's just cleansing. And I mean, just deep, beautiful, powerful pictures that God inspired through these prophets to write. For us to kind of read over them and to not allow ourselves to be in that space, we miss the strength of where God could call us to and grow us. And so I think that it's rich through the entire Bible.
I wonder, Japhet, what you're talking about there, if that's something we could practice more. So, for example, if you think about the way that the early church, I'm thinking about the first generation, maybe into the second, the way that they experienced the stories of Jesus was not by opening a scroll and reading them. It was almost certainly an oral tradition, which sounds really formal too. What does that mean? They got around campfires and they said, "Hey, Katie, tell us that story about when Jesus healed you. We got to hear that again."
Yeah.
And it was first person, friends. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
and tell me, hey, Peter, give us the story again about how you were racing John to the tomb. We got to hear that story again. All of the stories they literally were so they were full of emotion and connection with all the rich details that go far beyond what you have in the Gospels. I mean, we only have that's sort of just the cliff notes, that open up these whole stories that they would have been telling with all kinds of details and conversations. And I've wondered too, and some would be more comfortable with this than others, but I would really, and maybe we could try this on Saltworks some week, but it would be interesting to get a group of people together and to everybody take a role and to play act. And so you'd be forced to exercise your imagination. So literally, I just modeled this. It would be, Katie, when you got healed, so what were you doing that morning before you showed up to see Jesus? And you would just have to allow your imagination, you take on the character.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I think, Japhet, it's part of what you're talking. I mean, I'm extrapolating it into a creative idea, but I think that we approach the scriptures in a way that it can distill all the good stuff out in a way. It can boil things down to just the two verses that tell us something, and we kind of figure that out, and we don't allow the story and the emotions to really wash over us. And I think we could do some more things, like the creativity of Brandy's Sabbath school she's referencing, like Japhet, what you're describing, which is, I think it's got to be more.
Well, I think maybe that speaks, Alex, directly to what you said right at the beginning about the progression of the writers and then the pinnacle of John coming to, the book of Revelation, his letters and his gospel, and how he kind of pulls in so many of the other gospels stories and says, when I'm gone, what's going to take you through this moment right now is that you remember these stories, but you remember the reality of the love of God and how much he wants to be with us and to laugh with us and to cry with us, but to be with us through this. And I think we need to recognize that there is that intimacy that God is looking for and longing for from all of us.
Yvonne mentioned in the chat here that we should get back to testimonials. And I think she's onto something there. This is horrible to say because it's not in your self-interest as a pastor, but I used to think, would we be better off as a church if I just kept my mouth shut and we just had an open mic and people just came up and just honestly and just testified. And
I think you're absolutely right. I think you're right, Alex. I think that there's just so much strength in when people tell stories about it. I think that the difficulty is, and just a spanner in the works, the difficulty is that we're not very good at listening to people's stories.
No.
And I think that's a tragedy. And I think, when you talked about the first century church, my mind was immediately thinking about Jesus, with the scroll and how he read it in a different order from memory, right? And then I think it's because he's trying to tell a story. He's trying, and he created a moment where they were, okay, it's fulfilled today. It was powerful.
I think that in my last congregation where I pastored in Walla Walla for almost a decade, the most memorable thing probably that people will remember is nothing I said. There was one Sabbath where I did a sermon kind of setting it up, but we passed the microphones around the congregation. And people just said, my name is Katie Wagner, and I believe. My name is Joyce, and I believe. And that's it. We passed microphones. I don't know how many people were there. 1,000, 2,000. I don't know how many people were there, but basically we passed the mic around, and Katie, do you remember the feeling in the room?
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, it was like, talk about emotion, and that's all people said. They just testified. And it, so I do think there's something to that. And I think that it's personalizing and not intellectualizing.
We did that. I think it was this last year with some of our programming on campus. I happened to be on some of kind of the organizing committees, and we thought, let's try this. Let's try giving people this space to share what their journey was. And the reaction that we got was great, because what we noticed with our generation, kind of the student environment, is people are craving to hear things like testimonies where they can relate to what other people are going through, and seeing what other people went through and that they can go through that too. And knowing that there's a community of support. That's what we were hearing, is people felt like they weren't alone, and they felt like, oh, someone went through this. I have someone I can go talk to. So we started noticing that people were responding really well, because hearing something vocalized or hearing it kind of out in the open made them feel, this is an actual thing I'm going through, and I can get help, and I can have resources, or I have a friend who went through this. You know, it was very interesting to see the shift in reaction that we got when we complemented like singing or a sermon with a testimonial. It was very fascinating.
So Alex, Yvonne brought up a really interesting perspective in the text, that as children, we probably remember, whether it was evangelistic series or Vespers or whatever, when it's time for testimonies. And I still remember as kids, the collective eye roll that we had, because we knew what was coming was a bunch of vague religious speak that we didn't understand. And that and so here's what I'm wondering. How do we get better at telling the stories that can actually change, touch, and move lives? How do we get better at the storytelling instead of that vague stuff that made us roll our eyes?
I think the word testimonial actually sends a negative chill up my spine, because I think there's a couple. No, and I think, Joyce, I think there's a couple reasons. I would say one is they tend to be the same old story. I was a horrible person, and I was stumbling, I was stone drunk, and I was in the middle of an alley or something, and then Jesus saved me and everything turned out fine.
Alex, I actually walked on the moon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bryan.
Gotcha. No, but I think one is
testimony. Yeah.
I think that they always have to. So one, Joyce, they always have to end good, and I think that's a mistake. It's I was in this horrible and because I've heard students, for example, college students, I just don't have a good testimony. What they mean is they don't have a story of being stone drunk, and then all of a sudden they came to Jesus and everything turned out okay. So I think that's a huge problem. I mean, I think testimony, it's probably it's probably a story rather than testimony first. Maybe that's part of it, Joyce.
Have you ever heard a testimony where they said that they didn't have everything figured out, but they felt compelled to share?
Yeah.
Those are some very powerful ones where I've heard students say, I'm not through this yet, but I wanted to share what I'm going through because I feel like it could help someone else. Those are pretty powerful too.
Yeah. Indeed. My goodness, it's 11 o'clock in the Great Pacific Northwest Standard Time.
I was just going to comment on Katie's thought as well, that I do remember that, not just with testimonies, but with songs.
I think, I want to finish. I'll finish with this, just to kind of cap it off, maybe. So Japhet and Joyce and I were in a meeting this week, and we were actually physically present in the same space for a meeting this week, which was unusual. And Japhet and I had been in this meeting for a long hours and hours. Actually, it was a couple of days of meetings. And so we were it was exhausting, honestly. So Joyce joined the meeting. She hadn't been there the first day, but she joined the second day. And there happened to be a piano in the room where the meeting, where this meeting was. And Joyce, because she's like a moth to the light when it comes to a piano, Joyce is like, whoa, because she's a really good pianist. And so she went over and she starts to play. And she has her back to us, so she probably didn't see this, but she starts to play this just beautiful music. And snap of the finger, Japhet and I look at each other like this. Our eyes met and we were like, oh, that's good. And yes, it's because Joyce is really good, but it was deeper than that. It was sitting through 2 hours of the rigors of exhausting meetings for, 14 hours a day, long days. And all of a sudden there was music. And it was like a pause. And it's like all of a sudden our souls went to a place they had not been. And that's what we need. That's what we need. That's why we need music. That's why we need the emotions, because that's where we want to live, actually. And I think that's the music of Jesus. Jesus is the music of God. That's his melody. And Father in heaven, thank you for this hour that we've been able to connect with you. We're thankful for the relationship that you and David had. It teaches us a lot about you and about David, but more importantly about you and how we can connect to you. Be with us as we continue to walk with you. May we be clingy with you, stick near to you. Thank you. Thank you for your music. Thank you for Jesus. And we pray this in your name. Amen. Okay, before the question of the hour, or the end of the hour, Japhet, I think you should remind us with a link and with instructions about an experience that, man, I hope all of you will join. We're already starting to put the content together. Pretty excited about it. Japhet, tell us what's going on real quick, and then I'll wrap it up.
We're really blessed about the one project gathering that's coming up. Stay the course, Matthew 24, by the end of this month, we're going to have most of the core content worked out, and it's going to be a very unique couple of sessions, and over a couple of days from Australia, New Zealand, all the way through to United States and Europe and further afield. So I hope that you can register, and the link is basically the One Project website, and it's on the front page there, and register and join us for Stay the Course. We will not be having Saltworks that one Sabbath.
That's right.
That'll be the only one Sabbath we won't be, but because it's just at the same time. But we hope you'll be there. Yeah.
So we're only about a month away. I think that's the second to last weekend of October. It'll be loads of interaction, friends. So it's not just going to be content preached at, although there certainly will be that to stimulate conversation. But Joyce is going to help us facilitate all that in the conversation. So there's going to be a lot of really cool opportunities for a couple days to participate. So love to have you. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I'm super looking forward to it. So I warned you, what are you doing this afternoon? But also the smell that is the greatest smell in your experience. So I don't know who's going to go first. Katie, you get to go first.
Okay, so are we starting with what we're doing today, or?
You pick. You decide.
Well, currently I can see Haystack Rock from the window here, so we're gonna go explore the beach today. And then favorite smell. I'd have to say, even from when I was little, fresh homemade chocolate chip cookies. Whenever someone was making chocolate chip cookies, you knew when the oven door was opening. You could smell it instantly. And so since then, like, that is my favorite smell ever.
Nice. Brandy.
Okay, well, this afternoon I am actually, it's cool because in talking about the names of God, I ended up telling that to my masseuse, who turns out to also be studying the names of God. So they're going to bring some of their friends, and we're all going to go to this little tiny dying church that's open about an hour away today. And I'm excited because they on their own have studied about the Sabbath and they like it, but they don't have anywhere to go. So we're going to go to this little church and it's going to be fun. In Hauula, Joyce.
I love Hauula.
I know. And one of my favorite smells is actually clove. And it's a very non-Adventisty reason, because I had a lot of smokers in my life growing up. And I don't like the smell of smoke or cigarettes. But the clove cigarettes are something that are a fond memory to me. So I burn clove and I have that memory, and I don't smoke it, but I do smell it. And it makes me feel nostalgic and homey.
Nice. Joyce?
I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing this afternoon. Haven't talked to the family yet about that, but I'm absolutely certain it's going to involve a nice long walk now that we don't have smoke choking us down. And I think there's going to be a let up in the rain today. I'm looking forward to a really nice long walk with air that you can actually breathe. My favorite fragrance or scent of all, I think, is standing on or near the beach in the salty air. There's no smell quite like the beach. I don't know, freshly baked bread might be a close second, but the beach wins.
Yeah, agreed. Japhet de Oliveira.
Yes, I would have to say it would be wood, fresh cut wood. The problem is that I'm not a carpenter, and it's one of the things that I wish I was more than ever. But I love the smell of wood. I love the smell of like old wood and fresh cut wood. It's just fantastic. It just, I don't know, it makes me feel grounded. And so one day maybe I will learn to become a carpenter. Yeah, that would be phenomenal. And what am I doing this afternoon? I have not started my Lego car, and for weeks I've been saying I'm going to start it. I am going to take some time to do that, and then I'm going to edit the videos, the messages for the one project, a couple of them that we've got ready, and so I'm going to do this as well. Yeah.
That sounds like work. I keep reminding you.
Yeah, it's actually fun. It's brilliant. It's so much fun.
Somebody else
and
is
it's
going to
inspiring.
Yeah. So I'll pick two smells since Joyce picked a couple, and I'll go for two, but they're related. They're the smells of home. One is the smell of the woods in Western North Carolina, up in the mountains. There's a smell to the woods that is fabulous, and the humidity just pulls those smells out, and it's absolutely home. I love it. In the fall, with the leaves fall, boy, it really becomes strong, and it's just absolutely fabulous. And the other smell here in my hometown of Walla Walla, Washington is, and locals will know this, I love the smell of it's not dirt, so please hear me, it's not the dirt and the smoke, but there's a little bit of a dusty smell here, and you get out, and not when there's dust in the air, but there's a little, Katie, isn't that right? There's a little,
yeah.
I love it. When there's something about, I'm like, I know I'm home when I can smell that it's a very specific smell. And I remember it when I first moved here. I've just grown to absolutely love it. I love that smell. So, Japhet, don't be making fun of me in the chat. That's so wrong.
Alex, I thought you were going to say what the valley smells like when they're growing all of the onions in the fields. With
Oh.
the entire valley smells like onions.
No, it smells like
hmm.
it smells like the what do you call it? The onion potato chips. The
Exactly, right.
yeah, sour cream and onion potato chips everywhere.
Mhm.
Actually, I like that, Katie.
Everywhere.
It's not
Yeah,
bad.
it's good. It's good.
Yeah. So I would say, what am I gonna do this afternoon? My wife is away caring for family right now out of town. So that's the kids and I. And this morning I said, what do you want to do today? My son would like to go play with a friend that he has. And my daughter wants to go play with a friend that she has. So I'm
What do you
just
do?
all alone.
Oh no.
I don't even know what to do with myself. It's so sad.
It's not empty nesters for you, it's just empty nest.
It's just empty. I'm so sad.
Do you have the dogs?
The dogs are here, but I don't know. I'm mad at them. They've done some naughty things. So I'm going to wander the streets of College Place, knocking on doors, looking for friends. That's what I'm going to do today. Just randomly walk around and just knock on doors and see.
Wear a hoodie. Wear a hoodie.
He said, will this help? Yeah, I'll just.
Yeah, this will help. This will help. Yeah, dark glasses. I think it'd be really welcoming.
Yeah, it'll be good.
So if you see everybody with all their curtains pulled, you're
it'll
really
be,
offended, right?
There's a pastor in the neighborhood. Run away.
Or you ring on the doorbell, which actually happened to me, and the person inside said, "I'm not in."
Oh, that's funny.
So
all right. Well, blessings then to everybody. Have an amazing
blessings, everyone.
Yeah. You take care, and I'll see you guys.